Hi everyone, we're going to start this first lecture with your ASL Skills Development book. I'm recording this and I'm going to, as we go through the slides, probably move the video screen so that there's a better background behind it. This is just the intro slide, so I'm going to leave it where it is. You may want to have your book with you. I have mine with me. Again, it's the ASL Skills Development book, and we're going to start with the introduction. I'd like you to plan on reading pages 1 through 11. If you haven't already, it's going to be helpful after you view this video to go back and kind of read it for a better understanding. And also because I'll just hit on some points, but you will be responsible for vocabulary. So your book starts with language competence. And I wanted to bring to your attention where you are now in your training. And I want you really to think about the journey that you're already on and that you're about to embark on for those of you who plan on transferring or to pursue more training. You will hear often the phrase that a signer is not an interpreter. So if you haven't already heard that, you will start to hear it more often. And that's really important because if you think about the time that you have invested and that you're about to invest in this training, for those of you pursuing interpreter training, you really have to think about where you've come from, learning just a few signs, knowing just a little bit of having the ability to dialogue, have a conversation, but now imagine the ability to translate a message and include all of the nuances as we're going to talk about and all the meat that comes with a statement when it's said. So it's really important that you value the training and the time that you've invested in, but also value the competence that you're gaining and that you're building. Let me move the video. So your book mentions that when skills are developed within a language, the skills are called intralingual skills. So that means that you've not just learned how to say a few signs, you've not just learned how to understand a message, but you've learned how to play with the language. You've learned how to adjust and add more meaning, more depth to the things that you're saying, and to understand more from what is being said to you. And when skills are mastered and effectively used, that's when the real competence is present. That's when you're really at the interpreter level. So language competency includes the ability to understand the source language in all of its nuances, the ability to express yourself correctly, fluently, clearly, with poise in the target language. So that means no miscommunications, no misunderstandings. The intention of what you're trying to say is also embedded in the message. So if the goal of an interpreter is language competence, how do we keep going with that? How do you continue to grow and continue to become a more effective interpreter? So your book mentions the value of deliberate practice and the characteristics of effective practice. So that means you're not just signing just to sign. You're not just randomly practicing fingerspelling just to practice. You're doing it with intention. You're doing it with the goal of improving, say, a specific skill set. For example, if you think, man, I really want to slow down and be more clear when I fingerspell. That's a deliberate thing that you're now going to focus on, and you're going to identify ways to improve that specific thing that you've identified. When you join the field of interpreting, and I'll say, the field of interpreting, but the truth is in any field, any professional field, it is deliberate and intentional lifelong learning. So those who continue to practice, continue to focus, work with intention, watch others with intention. Those are the people that build, maintain, and grow their expertise in any field, right? So even if you think about an accountant or a teacher, you never stop learning. Laws change, approaches changes, maybe you get better at one skill versus another. And so the same thing happens with interpreting. The language changes, the model of interpreting changes, what's expected of an interpreter changes. And so you have to go with the flow of that and seek that deliberate practice and effective practice. Now, if you think about one of the requirements that I have added on the syllabus is that you participate in a workshop or webinar. Now, given the state of the world, the workshop in person may not be possible. But the reason I want you to think about that is uh, once you become a nationally certified interpreter, you are expected to do continuing education, which equals to about 20 hours a year. You can easily get them. You can do whatever, right? Free online stuff or show up to whatever. Some time ago with my own continuing education, I thought to myself, you know, I don't want to just show up because I want to see yous and sit in the back and watch and do nothing. I want to choose workshops that are something that I want to learn. Like if I have to put 20 hours into something, I want them to be the things I want to learn. Like I wanted to really focus on law enforcement at one point, and I looked and looked for a law enforcement series. They're really hard to find, as it turns out. But when it came out, I even canceled what I had to do that day. This is what I wanted. That's where I'm going to put my time. And that's what I mean is you have to really consider where you're headed and then seek that training. Maybe in the beginning where you're a novice or new at interpreting or new at signing, maybe you kind of touch on everything because you want to get a feel for this or that, you want to understand. But once you're practicing, it really, really helps you grow and build when you choose things that really you're interested in, but also that give you practice, that deliberate practice with intention and with the idea of growing your skill set. So in your book, it mentions the effort model, and the effort model suggests three main effort areas in the interpreting process. Those are the listen and analysis effort, the production effort, and the memory effort. So this is, if you think about the process of interpreting, the process of interpreting takes a great conscious effort. It's not automatic. People are not up there just like saying the right words or signing the right signs. It's not an automatic process. It may look automatic, but the fact is that in your mind, like in a millisecond or split second, you're hearing a word and you're deciding this is what I'm going to sign for it. And you're not just deciding this is what I'm going to sign for it. You're also deciding this is where I'm going to place it. Sometimes you're wrong. Sometimes I'm wrong. I'm like, oh, I meant it this way. And it would have been better if I knew. In that sense, a little bit of schema is helpful, and you'll hear me refer to that word a little later. A little bit of background information, but when I have nothing, I'm making those decisions just in the moment. And so your book mentions a person named Guile, who suggests these three main effort areas that are happening all the while during the interpretation process. So respectively, the listen and analysis effort is really your comprehension of what is being said, the message you received, and how you understand what you understand it to mean. The production effort is your speech planning, verbal output, or also your sign output and your sign planning. So where's your placement? How are you gonna what sign have you chosen to use to represent something? As we know, many times, many signs could get the same message across. But you're looking for something specifically to match a tone, to match an affect and an intention behind a meaning. And the memory effort deals with the stresses placed on your short-term memory system. So it's in and it's out. It's in and it's out, and many times a very difficult assignment may wear you out, and it could be just you don't feel physically worn out, but you feel kind of tired because you put a lot of effort into something, and at the same time you remember maybe two things from it because there's a big demand on your short-term memory for the input and the output of information. Your book mentions something on self-confidence, and it mentions um, that when you're building your skills, you must have the self-confidence in order to truly achieve a mastery. What I wanted to add with this is to say, as an interpreter, you must have self-confidence. You must build self-confidence and you must show self-confidence. You cannot show your clients, hearing or deaf, that you feel unsure or insecure. You got to make mistakes with confidence. And what that means is I make mistakes all the time, but when I was a newer interpreter, making a mistake embarrassed me and I felt awful and I didn't know how to get through it. As a more seasoned interpreter, I make a mistake and I fix it. I own it. And I'm confident enough to say that was an interpreter error. Let me move on because I have the skill to take a step back and rework it, or to find that I've made that mistake and identify it, because I know it's not about me, it's about the work. And so that's something that I really want you to take from here. You got to have it, you got to build it, and you must show it. So vocabulary. Your book references a lot of vocabulary, and actually there's a lot of vocabulary that's the same in this ASL Skills Development book, and it's the same used in the English Skills Vocabulary book. And so I want you to make sure that you review the vocabulary and that you know what it means, the way that it's presented. So you're going to be responsible for it. It may come up on an online quiz. I expect you to use these words to refer to your interpreting work and use it correctly. And again, you may be tested on it. I also would like you to look at your book and review the how to use the study set section. So it gives you an idea of what you should do before the exercises. It gives you an idea of how you should plan to start the exercises. And then it also says, hey, you probably should do this more than one time. That's a great suggestion. And don't think about this class or these assignments as just something you want to get through and get it over with. I want to remind you that you selected this class and enrolled in it because you have a goal and you want to be here and you want to be something. And probably most of you want to be interpreters. And so for that reason, don't approach an assignment like, oh, this book said to do it twice. I get through it. Actually, take a look at it and do it twice. See what it feels like to see the assignment the first time and then see them the second time. I'll tell you that I haven't been in an interpreter training program in over 20 years. That's how long I've been working. I've not looked at books, these kinds of books. These aren't the books I used in my program. And I did the assignment. The one that we're going to do next, I did it. And I thought, that guy signs pretty fast. And I looked at it, actually I watched that guy 4 times before I looked at the questions. I kind of had to get a feel for the structure of the book and how it's laid out, and just the rhythm of how the intention behind using the book is. I didn't have that, and so I imagine you guys don't either. So I do suggest that you take that to heart and just use it as it's meant to be used. And for those of you who are home and have some time, I'm home and have some time. So let's do it and see what comes of it, okay? So uh, I kind of jumped over the progress tracking sheet. I don't think that I'm going to use it. Maybe it's a good idea if somebody uses it. If you do choose to use it and it proves helpful, let me know that, because maybe I'll come back to that and use it. Maybe I'll refer to that. As of now, as of the moment of recording this, I'm not going to use it, but I do appreciate feedback. So if somebody decides to use it and it helps, please do let me know. So page 15, main idea comprehension. So your book starts with the idea of, first of all, we talked about uh, language comprehension and intralingual skills. When you have intralingual skills, it means that you understand nuances. And so, what does that even mean? What does understanding language and all of its nuances mean? Well, all languages have different ways of sending and coding a message. So what that means is we don't just say words for the sake of saying words. We say them with tone, with variation in meaning, with sometimes a subtext behind it. Have you ever heard, why do you say one thing and you mean another? Uh, when someone says to you in a certain tone, um, did you want to go out to dinner? And you're like, that really means you don't want to go out to dinner, right? So what I want you to think about behind that is, how do we understand those things? How do we get all that meaning behind those words? Really, it's our fluency in the language, right? So for your consideration, uh, I'm going to ask you these questions. Um, these two questions, I'm I'm not going to restate them on Canvas, so you should write these questions down so that you can respond to them. This is my way to kind of check that you did watch the video. I'll just write for your consideration. So listen for the questions on these slides. So coding a message. Message 1. A student goes to turn in his paper, and after looking through 2 pages, the teacher asks, "Are you sure you want to turn this in?" So what's the subtext behind the message? What the teacher really means is, yeah, this isn't ready to be turned in. So think about 2 things. One is think about how we even understand that. Is it the tone that the teacher used? Is it their facial expression? Is it the body language? Maybe while asking the question, the teacher was handing back the paper. How did we figure out that subtext? Another example is, this mint is really delicious. It's got a unique flavor. Do you want one? So I didn't express the enthusiasm, but the enthusiasm of the person is in saying, hey, you really want this delicious, great tasting mint? Is really, dude, you need a mint. How do we pick up on those clues? So my questions for you that I'm going to ask you to answer on Canvas are, As an interpreter, and there's no wrong answer, I just want you to start to think about this, but what is your responsibility in conveying this subtext? So you're the interpreter, and you're the one who has to interpret. Are you sure you want to turn this in? What's your responsibility if you, as the interpreter, understood that to mean this isn't ready to be turned in? That's a question I pose to you. The second question I pose to you is, if you answered yes, how would you do it? What tools or skills, how do you sign it? So I'd like you to answer those two questions just to kind of think about that. So as the interpreter, when you're listening to a message, getting ready to render your interpretation, what is it that you're looking for? You're looking for these three main things. The main idea, basically what is the point of this message? Keywords. This could be important, say, if you're a college interpreting, or even interpreting in a meeting. What are the keywords that they keep saying? What are the important things that they're going to come to revisit? And schema. From these three things, you're going to hear the word schema a lot, even after you go on to working. And so what schema really, there's kind of a long piece on schema in your book that you should take a look at. But the short version is that schema is your perspective, your experience, your background. And so if you go into an assignment with no schema, it makes it all that more difficult to interpret the message. But the question is, for your thought, can you interpret a message if you have no schema? A skilled interpreter can. Somebody with strong intralingual skills can interpret the message. But even that person, even the strongest interpreter, the best signer, the strongest person with great intralingual skills, even that person, even for them, schema will make a big difference. So schema is something that you're going to always be looking for. Just right before you do anything, you're going to want to think, what could this possibly be about? What signs could come up? What vocabulary could come up? What would I use? The other thing that I want to point out that your book also mentions is the areas of difficulty in ASL comprehension. So these, they said it so nicely, areas of difficulty, but really it means where interpreters err, where a lot of errors come out, where they mess up, where we fail, areas of difficulty in ASL comprehension. Fingerspelled word recognition. That's the deaf person, finger spells, and I don't know what he said. Numbers in ASL. Did they say 1,035 or did they say 100,000, thousand, million, thousand? I don't know. And ASL signs. So your book uses the example of maybe a person signs apple, orange, banana, and the interpreter maybe voice interprets apple, orange, banana. But what they're really saying is fruit. Those kinds of things. Compound signs, ASL signs, or things, for example, this comes up a lot, is somebody will say, will sign something like, you know that guy, and I'll say, in sign language, we say literally themselves deaf, but the interpreter shouldn't voice, you know, my friend themselves deaf. No, we don't in spoken English say, you know, that person themselves blah blah blah, and then add an adjective. That's not how we speak. But you'll hear sometimes a voice interpretation be that, and that's an error, because that's literally taking a word for word translation of what has been said, but that's not the meaning, that's not the intention, and that's not how the interpretation should be. That's not a true interpretation. It wasn't rendered appropriately. Okay, so thank you so much for watching this lecture. Now what you should go on to do is exercise 1.1. In this book, I did it too. I would like you to answer the questions on Canvas. And one second, get to know the signer, study questions. On the study questions, number 9 and 11 require you to videotape yourself and submit it. We won't always be submitting ourselves videotaping, but because of the nature of technology being our main place and the way of the world, I'd like to start with that, see how it goes, and I don't mind adjusting, but let's try submitting those as they are, okay? Thanks.